we're going to learn how to use adjectives in English speaking and writing. Let's begin. What is an adjective? An adjective is a word that is used to describe or tell more about nouns and pronouns. Adjectives help us to express our ideas and opinions with greater complexity. Let's consider two examples. Here is a sentence without an adjective. I live in a house. Now, let's try adding some adjectives to give us more information about our noun, house. Here is the same sentence with one adjective. I live in a small house. And with two adjectives, I live in a small, old house. And finally, with three adjectives, I live in a small, old, blue house. Let's look at one more example. Here is another sentence without adjectives. I like movies. Okay, now I know you like movies, but we can be more specific by adding just a few adjectives. With one adjective, I like new movies. With two adjectives, I like new, exciting movies. And with three adjectives, I like new, exciting action movies. You could even add more. Adding adjectives helps the person you are talking to better understand you and what you are talking about. Adjectives can be split into many categories like shape, words like square, round, and circular, color, words like red, orange, and yellow, and age, words like old and new. Today, let's look deeper at three categories of adjectives: size, quantity, and quality. There are many adjectives that can be used in each of these categories. The ones we will learn today are some of the most common. First, let's talk about size. Size is one of the most commonly used types of adjectives. These adjectives are mainly useful for describing physical things. Two of the most well-known size adjectives are big and small. But there are many ways to express just how big or how small something is. Let's take a look at this chart that shows size adjectives in order from small to big. On the left, we see a word for something very small, miniature. Often in English, we shorten this word to mini. For example, the boy looks like a miniature version of his father, or the boy looks like a mini version of his father. Next is the word tiny. Something tiny is very small. In a sentence, we can use the adjective tiny like this. Look at those tiny ants. Or, did you see the tiny puppy over there? The word tiny implies that something is smaller than usual or expected. After tiny, we see the word small, which can be used in any situation in which you want to express that something is less than a normal size. For example, she's a small girl, or my phone is so small. There are also adjectives we can use to express that something is neither bigger nor smaller than expected, but is a normal size. The adjectives in the middle of the chart can be used interchangeably. Normal-sized, average-sized, and medium-sized. We'd use these terms in a sentence like this. I want to buy a normal-sized table, not too small or too big. I have an average-sized apartment. It's a medium-sized car. On the right side of the table, we first have the words big and large. These two words are very common and can be used to express that something is greater than a normal size. For example, this is a big classroom, or that's a large tree. After big and large, we have the word huge. This adjective is used to describe something very big or bigger than expected. For example, that building is huge, or this is a huge meal. Even bigger than huge are the adjectives gigantic and enormous. These adjectives are used for things that are extremely big. Here are a few ways we can use these words. Tokyo is a gigantic city. China has an enormous population. Quality means how good or bad something is. These adjectives are extremely useful and are used to describe opinions, physical things, emotions, and more. Let's take a look at our third chart for some of the most common quality adjectives. On the left, we see adjectives used to describe things that are bad or that we dislike. Let's begin with the adjectives terrible and horrible. These words are used to talk about things that are really, really bad. Let's see the words in a sentence. That was a terrible movie. I had a horrible flight. Awful is another word used to describe things that are really bad. For instance, I have an awful headache. That song is awful. Bad can be used in any situation. If you want to express dislike or low quality, bad can be used anytime without sounding as serious as words like awful and horrible. For instance, I had a bad day. This is not as serious as I had a horrible day, but still means it was not good. In the middle of the chart, we see the neutral adjectives okay, fine, and decent. These words mean that something is not good and not bad, just in the middle. Let's see it in context. The pizza was okay. The class was fine. He's a decent singer. Next, on the right, we see words to describe things that are better than okay. Good, great, wonderful, and amazing. Good is like the word bad. It can be used in any situation and expresses like or good quality. It is not so serious. For example, I had a good day is not as serious as I had an amazing day. Great means something is better than good. For example, this is great soup. Words like wonderful and amazing are used to describe things that are really, really good. For example, she is a wonderful teacher, or I had an amazing vacation. Next, let's take a look at quantity adjectives. These adjectives tell us how much of something there is. It is important to note that the quantity adjective we use depends on the noun. If it is a noun, or person, place, or thing, that can be counted in numbers, it is called a countable noun. These are words like car, house, and friend. These are all things we can count. For instance, I can count 5 cars, 4 houses, 10 friends, and so on. If it is a noun that cannot be counted, it is called an uncountable noun. These are words like stress and rain. I cannot count rain or stress. I cannot say there are 10 rains or I have 35 stresses. Therefore, these words are uncountable nouns. Let's take a look at the following chart of quantity adjectives. Blue words should only be used with uncountable nouns. Red words should only be used with countable nouns. And black words can be used with any noun, as you'll see in the top right corner of the chart. First, we see the adjective phrase, a little. Just like the word little means small, a little means there is a small amount of something. A little can be used with uncountable nouns. For example, I'm a little stressed, and I have a little water in my shoes. Next, we see the terms few and a few. It is important to note that few and a few can only be used with countable nouns. A few implies that there is not much of something. For example, there are few cars on the road today, and we only have a few carrots. In the middle is the adjective some. This is an adjective that implies that there is a medium or average amount of something. Some can also be used with any type of noun. Here are some examples. Will you get some snacks from the store? Let's listen to some music while we study. Many is the next adjective. And like few and a few, many can only be used with countable nouns. Remember, countable nouns are things you can count with numbers. Let's look at a few examples. I don't have many books at home. She has many classes this semester. The final quantity adjective we'll talk about today is a lot of or lots of. These terms can be used with any type of noun and in many different ways. Let's consider 3 examples. She has a lot of shoes. There are lots of restaurants near my house. There's a lot of snow on the sidewalk. How to put adjectives in the correct order. Let's get started. Have you ever been confused about how to describe something using several adjectives? When multiple adjectives come before a noun, they have to be put in a particular order. For instance, we say a fat old lady, not an old fat lady, and a small shiny black leather bag, not a leather black shiny small bag. The rules for adjective word order are complicated, but today we'll talk about some of the most important rules. First, adjectives of color, origin, or where something is from, material, or what something is made of, and purpose, or what something is used for, usually go in that order. Color, origin, material, and purpose. Let's take a look at some examples. Black Spanish leather hiking boots. A silver German beer mug. A red silk scarf. An Italian glass flower vase. An oak dinner table. Next, other adjectives usually go before words of color, origin, material, and purpose. Adjectives of size, shape, length, height, and age often come first. Let's look at some examples. The round glass table. Here we see the shape, round, comes before the material. Number 2. A big modern brick house. Here we see the size and age come before the material. Number 3. A tall, ancient Cambodian temple. Here we see the height and age come before the origin. Number 4. A long, old English book. Here we see the length and age before origin. Adjectives which express judgments or attitudes usually come before other adjectives. Examples are lovely, definite, pure, absolute, extreme, perfect, wonderful, and silly. Here are some examples. Number 1, a lovely, long, cool drink. Number 2, who's that silly young man over there? Number 3, what a perfect, long, warm summer day. Finally, let's consider numbers. Numbers usually go before all other adjectives. For example, we would say 6 large eggs and the second big storm. First, next, and last most often go before 1, 2, 3, and so on. For example, the first 3 days and my last 2 jobs. Okay, let's get some practice. I'm going to put 3 sentences with mistakes in them up on the screen. Pause the video and try to fix the mistakes. Number 1, I have the French black perfect dress. Number 2, have you seen those red old brick lovely 3 houses? Number 3, the 3 last weeks were cold. Did you figure it out? Now let's look at the correct sentences. Number 1, I have the perfect black French dress. Number 2, have you seen those 3 lovely old red brick houses? And number 3, the last 3 weeks were cold. In number 1, the word perfect is a judgment, which means it comes before all other nouns. We also list color, black, before origin, French. In number 2, we see the number 3, which comes first. We also see the judgment word, lovely, which needs to come before other nouns. Age, old, comes before color, red, which comes before material, brick. In number 3, remember that we use words like first, next, and last before numbers. And today we're going to learn more about using adjectives to express yourself. Last time we learned how to use more adjectives in our English speaking and writing to help others better understand what we think and mean. Today we're going to talk about a very helpful thing called comparative adjectives. Okay everyone, let's talk about how to compare things using adjectives. First, what does it mean to compare? To compare means to talk about what is the same and what is different between 2 or more things. Every word has a certain number of syllables. Syllables are the number of vowel sounds you hear in a word. In English, vowels are the letters A, E, I, O, and U. But this idea can be a little confusing, so let's make it even easier with something called the clap test. Here are some adjectives. Let's see if we can hear how many syllables there are in each of the following adjectives. Happy. Happy. There are 2 vowel sounds, A and E, and 2 claps, so 2 syllables. Cute. Cute. 1 vowel sound, U, 1 clap, 1 syllable. Tiny. Tiny. 2. Strong. Strong. 1. Beautiful. Beautiful. 3. Expensive. Expensive. 3. Comfortable. Comfortable. 4. Exciting. Exciting. 3. Now you try. Repeat after me and clap while you say the words. Funny. Funny. Did you hear it? There are 2 syllables. Funny. Big. Big. There's just 1 syllable in this word. Big. Interesting. Interesting. In this word, there are 4 syllables. Interesting. Knowing how many syllables there are in an adjective is the trick to knowing which comparative form to use. If a word has 1 or 2 syllables, we use the form than. These are words like big, big, hot, funny, happy, and easy. Here is how we would use these words to compare. Big. 1. Bigger than. The dog is bigger than the cat. Hot. 1. Hotter than. Summer is hotter than winter. Funny. 2. Funnier than. Dave is funnier than Bill. Happy. Happy. 2. Happier than. She is happier than she was yesterday. Easy. 2. Easier than. Walking is easier than running. When an adjective has 3 or more syllables, we use the form more than or less than. These are words like expensive, delicious, beautiful, difficult, and interesting. Here is how we would use words with 3 or more syllables to compare. Expensive, 3. More expensive than, less expensive than. The car is more expensive than the bike. The bike is less expensive than the car. Delicious, 3. More delicious than, less delicious than. Pears are more delicious than apples. Apples are less delicious than pears. Beautiful, 3. More beautiful than, less beautiful than. This painting is more beautiful than that one. That painting is less beautiful than this one. Difficult, 3. More difficult than, less difficult than. Science is more difficult than math. Math is less difficult than science. Interesting, 4. More interesting than, less interesting than. Watching a movie is more interesting than watching TV. Watching TV is less interesting than watching a movie. Than and more than are all useful when comparing things. But what if we want to talk about the highest quality or degree of something when we compare? In this case, we would use superlative adjectives. Just like comparative adjectives, the superlative form follows the same clap test rules. If an adjective has 1 or 2 syllables, we use the ist. If an adjective has 3 or more syllables, we use the most. Let's look at some pictures for a few examples. Here we see a mouse, an elephant, and a whale. Let's put some adjectives up to describe each. Small, smart, big. There we go. Each word, small, smart, and big, have 1 syllable, so we will use the ist in our sentences. Let's use superlative adjectives to compare them. The mouse is the smallest. The elephant is the smartest. The whale is the biggest. Let's take a look at another example. Here we see a famous actress, a huge house, and some great food. Let's put up some adjectives to describe each. Beautiful, expensive, delicious. Beautiful, expensive, and delicious have 3 syllables. So we will use the most in our sentences. Let's give it a try. If you ask me, she is the most beautiful actress in Hollywood. This is the most expensive house in the city. These are the most delicious noodles I have ever had. As you can see, we use superlatives to talk about when something is the highest quality or degree of something. Let's try making some superlative sentences with some of the same adjectives from earlier in today's lesson. Happy, 2 syllables. So, the happiest. She is the happiest student. Cute, 1 syllable. So, the cutest. You have the cutest pet. Tiny, 2 syllables. So, the tiniest. That's the tiniest phone I've ever seen. Comfortable, 4 syllables. So, the most comfortable. My bed is the most comfortable. Exciting, 3 syllables. So, the most exciting. Basketball is the most exciting sport to watch. Remember, 1 or 2 syllables means we use the ist, and 3 or more syllables means we use the most. Uh-oh, exception alert. The clap test is a good way to know which comparative or superlative form to use when you compare things. But like many rules in English, there are some exceptions. First, let's look at the adjectives good and bad. Although these words each have 1 syllable, good, and bad, we do not say gooder than or the goodest, badder than or the baddest. Here's what we use instead. good, better, the best. That car is good. This car is better than that car. This car is the best. Bad, worse, the worst. This song is bad. That song is worse than this one. That song is the worst. The words much and many are also exceptions to this rule. Instead of mucher than or the manyest, here is what we would use. Much, many. More than, the most. I have many books. You have more books. She has the most books. Much and many refer to quantity. The word little can too, and is another exception. Here is what we would use. Little, less, the least. I have little patience. You have less patience. He has the least patience. Finally, words that end in ing, ed, ful, or less will always use the more or less than or the most forms, no matter how many syllables the adjective has. Here are some examples. Boring. This word has 2 syllables but ends in ing, so we would say, this class is more boring than that class, or this class is the most boring. Tired. Tired has 2 syllables but ends in ed, so we would say, he is more tired than me, or he is the most tired. Useful. This word also has 2 syllables but ends in ful, so we would say, this app is more useful than that one, or this app is the most useful. Fearless. This word has 2 syllables but ends in less, so we would say, she is more fearless than you, or she is the most fearless. Okay, my wonderful students, that concludes our lesson today on comparative and superlative adjectives.